So I saw this weird video on climate change I want to talk about. It's by Our Changing Climate. It's called Is Veganism Really the Answer? And the weird thing about it, I'm not familiar with this channel at all, but you get from just watching the first few minutes, okay, this person is anti-capitalist, Marxist, communist. I don't know exactly what they're promoting, but clearly anti-capitalist. And they think the big problem and the big driver of climate change is capitalism.
The flesh of another animal made into food. The path of a steak or a slab of bacon from field to fork is one mired in exploitation and environmental harm. In part, this is because today's meat industry epitomizes capitalist commodification and exploitation in the name of accumulating profits. The process of meat production squeezes both animals and humans in order to assure prices stay low and profits stay high.
Which gets them into a really weird situation later in the video. I think it leads them to disregard a huge part of climate change and of animal exploitation because they're so hyper-focused on corporations being to blame.
Capitalism has turned meat into a commodity to be bought and sold. Its value has been transformed from one of taste and quality to one of profit and quantity. Capitalism has deftly removed us consumers from any glimpse of the production process.
Capitalism or industrial agriculture? Because the two are not the same thing. You can be a communist country and still practice industrial farming. You can still practice cramming animals into tiny spaces, treating them as commodities instead of sentient beings. Just look at East Germany. In fact, there's an entire book. It's called Communist Pigs, An Animal History of East Germany's Rise and Fall. The pig, he argues, played a fundamental role in the GDR's attempts to create a modern industrial food system, albeit one based on communist principles of large-scale collective farming. By the mid-80s, East Germany produced more pork per capita than West Germany and the United Kingdom together. They still dealt with pollution. They still dealt with animal disease. Communist and capitalist countries adopted analogous forms of agricultural production, which treated land, labor, and animals as cheap and disposable. The crises of air and water pollution, the breakdowns in its farms, and the series of temporary food shortages in East Germany appear not as an aberration, but as a central feature of industrial agriculture everywhere. To be clear, I do agree that unchecked capitalism, companies literally being able to do whatever they want, is a problem, and many people will end up exploiting resources and sentient beings in order to make a buck. Factory farms don't exist because people are psychopaths. They exist because it's efficient and it is the cheapest, easiest way to make meat. They're not doing it to be cruel to animals. It's easier to be cruel. It costs less money to be cruel. Packing animals tightly and not keeping them clean and growing them as fast as possible is cheaper. I mean, if you have a cat and you just let the cat roam around outside, put some food out for it, but don't tend to any fleas, or maybe they get some kind of an injury, you don't take them to the vet, that's a hell of a lot cheaper than someone who actually takes care of their animal. Probably keeps them inside, takes them to regular vet checkups, a lot more expensive. But number one, animal exploitation did not begin with capitalism. Using animals for food and other resources did not begin with capitalism. Now, you can argue that originally we had to use animals for food, of course, and there are still people today who have to do that, but there are lots of small farms that are choosing to harm animals. But again, this is about climate change, not really animal welfare, but the same thing applies. Harming the climate did not start with capitalism, and these small farms are still harmful. In some ways, they are worse. Allowing cows to actually be free range and to graze is very bad for the environment. So even if you were to get rid of capitalism, if you're still going to feed people with meat, what are you going to do with the methane? What are you going to do with the waste? What are you going to do about eutrophication? What are you going to do about the land use? Presumably, if factory farming equals capitalism, we're no longer going to be factory farming animals. Well, now animals are going to need more land per animal. Eating meat from animals that's not like lab grown is not a solution, capitalism or not. But the thing I really want to talk about is that he completely avoids. He doesn't mention even once. It's like, God, it's almost a 30-minute video. He never mentions government subsidies. Just want to note that one of the reasons the meat and dairy industry remains so profitable despite its enormous inefficiency is due to taxpayer-funded incentives and subsidies. The state is constantly rescuing this industry from its failures and pushing it to overproduce. I mean, what was I just reading about? The government paying for extra cheese that nobody's eating? Call me crazy, but I don't think that's capitalism. Demand for dairy in the US has plummeted 42% since 1975, but that hasn't stopped American farmers from producing more and more of it. Over the years, the industry has found all sorts of ways to get rid of its excess supply, some more insidious than others. In the 90s and early 2000s, even as US nutritionists expressed growing concern about saturated fats and rising obesity levels, a marketing firm created and partially funded by the USDA gave millions to fast food companies such as Taco Bell and Domino's to push them to increase the amount of cheese on menu items by as much as 8-fold. Buoyed by items like Wendy's dual double melt sandwich concept and Taco Bell's steak quesadilla, the organization helped boost cheese sales by more than 30 million pounds. In 2016, dairy farmers resorted to simply dumping 43 million gallons of milk down the drain. The same year, the USDA bought up $20 million worth of cheese to cut the glut. And as of March 31st, the US still has 1.4 billion pounds of cheese in cold storage, only now it's owned by private companies. Some of this is normal inventory storage or cheese being aged, yet part of this cheese mountain represents an enduring surplus, a very literal representation of the dairy industry's mismatch with the realities of the market. He never mentions the power of the animal agriculture lobbies, right? There's the pork industry, there's the dairy industry, there's the beef industry, there's the egg industry. He never mentions the power these have over policy, over our government, which is really not capitalism. There's a term for it, crony capitalism. You'll hear libertarians use that all the time. I thought you'd mention the role that government subsidies of animal agriculture plays into this issue. And you can say, oh, it's just an oversight. He missed that. But I think it's indicative of this sort of mindset when you're starting from factory farming, climate change, even animal abuse, that's kind of implied in the video, animal exploitation. If it all stems for capitalism, why would he mention government subsidies? Why would he mention the power of these lobbies? Either he's ignoring it or he's not seeing it because that's not how he views the world, so he misses that completely, or he's intentionally leaving it out of the conversation because it doesn't fit in with his narrative, with his corporations are to blame for everything sort of narrative. Again, weird video, someone letting their view of the world and what they want politically to kind of color their view of a really important issue of climate change and veganism. Is veganism really the answer? I mean, it's not. Going vegan is really important, and he is right that we need policy change as well. We need governments promoting plant-based for one thing, and carbon taxes, but transportation is a big factor, construction is a big factor, and these are not affected by going vegan. And remember that as an individual, one of the best things by far that we can do is go vegan or significantly reduce our animal product consumption. Unless you're just eating oysters and like lionfish, then you're fine. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you did and like the video. Click the bell if you want to be notified when I upload a new video. Thank you so much to my patrons at patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. I do post 2 exclusive videos there a month for $5 plus patrons, one of which is a controversial topic that is unrelated to veganism. I posted one for July not too long ago, and I'll have the one for August up in the next few weeks or so. Thanks again for watching. New video soon.
The meat industry has a strong control of food production in the United States. Even plant-based alternatives like Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers, and now Tyson's own plant-based line are still wrapped up and consumed by capitalist processes. They're patented and controlled not by the people democratically, but by just a few CEOs and investors who are often the same ones in the meat industry, who are looking to profit off shifting diets.
Exactly. They are responding to consumer demand. To act as though consumers have no power is just ridiculously silly. Now, he is right that it is in the hands ultimately of the producers. You can do like the dairy industry and continue to produce more and more dairy, even though demand is on the decline, especially when the government will help you pick up the slack. But we as consumers clearly have a lot of power. The only reason Tyson is investing in plant-based meats meats is because we want plant-based meats.
Pushes for global veganism can be colored, perhaps unconsciously, by imperialist tendencies. As Max Eil writes in A People's Green New Deal, claiming that a meatless society is a good thing creates an immediate moral justification for doing things to stop people, especially pastoralists in the third world, from ceasing to raise or eat meat.
No, it does not. And I don't hear any vegans calling for people who have no other options to stop farming animals. That is just so silly as far as is possible and practicable. Now, he also gives this cultural argument.
For many, there are also a number of cultural barriers to going vegan. Whether it's your grandma's famous turkey pot pie, the cattle ranged for subsistence, or the salmon your people have been fishing for hundreds of generations, meat can hold spiritual and communal significance. Plant-based diets, especially veganism, leave little room for those emotionally important meals.
Which is very stupid to me and very infantilizing. I've talked about that a lot on this channel. Yes, it can be harder to be vegan if you have like family members who are making fun of you. Obviously, I am extremely sympathetic towards those sorts of experiences, but it doesn't justify eating meat. Eating meat doesn't become okay just because you have some sort of cultural attachment to it. We all have cultural attachments to eating meat. Every single country on this planet has a cultural attachment to eating some form of meat.